claim. Joining me now from Perth is the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Senator Matthias Cormann. Matthias, we've heard from Craig Thomson now. He explains it wasn't him. How convincing is this to you?
Well, I hope that the Prime Minister was watching that interview, because it goes straight now to her credibility and to her judgment. How much longer will she stand by Craig Thomson and accept his vote on the floor of the Parliament? His story was completely unbelievable and bizarre. Clearly, Fair Work Australia thought that his story was unbelievable. I mean, what he wants us to believe is that somehow there is some phantom stalker in the union movement who went into his house, stole his credit card, his driver's license and his mobile phone, went to use it on prostitution, went back to his house, put it all back where it belonged, and then, of course, what we've got to remember is that Craig Thomson signed off on that credit card slip, even though apparently he now wants us to believe that he knew that somebody was out to get him and to set him up. If that is the case.
That's the only concession that Craig Thomson made in the interview. The only thing he said he could have done better was actually check his credit card records more carefully before he signed off on these escort services and the like.
Well, you would have thought that if you know that somebody is out there to get you, and that somebody has threatened that they will set you up with prostitutes, that you would very carefully look at your credit card statements and make a complaint to police if anything dodgy had happened. And why is it that for over 4 years now, this is the first time that he has made these sorts of claims in public?
He has a point, though, doesn't he, in that Fair Work Australia has not been able to put this together as a brief of evidence for prosecutors. They weren't prepared to make it public except through Parliament to get parliamentary privilege. He has not been charged. There are no charges against him. I mean, this is the issue. As unbelievable as his story might sound, he is still sitting out there innocent until proven guilty.
Well, I mean, this whole thing is a mess, and clearly Fair Work Australia has got a lot to answer for in terms of the way they've handled this process. I mean, there are some serious issues under the Electoral Commission Act too, but the Australian Electoral Commission is now saying that because the inquiry took so long, that a lot of these complaints might now no longer be able to be pursued because time has run out. Look, I mean, there's a lot of questions to be answered by Fair Work Australia, there's no doubt about that, but fundamentally, on the story itself, the question today is, does the Prime Minister believe his story? Does the Prime Minister continue to stand by this man and continue to accept his vote on the floor of Parliament? Because this is now a real issue that goes to her credibility and to her judgment.
Now, the opposition tried to have Craig Thomson suspended from Parliament this week in a parliamentary motion. I think you're wrong in doing that. I don't think it's Parliament's job to judge whether or not Craig Thomson is innocent or guilty. I think Tony Windsor's spoken about this, and he's right. Shouldn't you, if your argument is about the government standing by Craig Thomson and about the Labor Party paying his legal bills, your beef should be with the government and the fact that it's relying on Craig Thomson for support. Rather than targeting Craig Thomson, shouldn't you be putting up a no-confidence motion or censure motion in the government?
Our beef is with the government, and clearly, increasingly, the independents on whose support the government relies are increasingly asking similar questions to the questions that we've been asking for some time. Ultimately, this is a matter for the government, but the government at present, led by a weak, incompetent, desperate Prime Minister who is focused on her short-term political survival rather than on the long-term national interest, is doing everything to cling on to power.
So if your beef is with the government, why are we seeing the opposition in Parliament consistently targeting Craig Thomson and trying to turn Parliament into effectively a jury trial for Craig Thomson?
Well, we're not turning Parliament into a jury trial for Craig Thomson. We are focusing on the Member of Parliament who's got some serious explaining to do, who is keeping Julia Gillard in government. Julia Gillard is relying on a tainted vote to stay in Parliament. She's doing everything she can to cling on to power no matter what. This is not good for the Parliament, it's not good for our nation.
But she can't. Julia Gillard cannot say she's not going to accept Craig Thomson's vote. The people of Dobell put him in Parliament. Of course he's allowed to vote in Parliament. He should either resign to go and deal with these issues, or if the whole situation is unsatisfactory, then shouldn't you be asking the other independent MPs to withdraw support from the government?
Well, he probably should consider his position in the Parliament, and you're quite right. I mean, the independents that are currently still supporting the government should ask themselves the question: when is enough enough? when should we actually, as independents, make a decision that is in the national interest and in the long-term interest of our nation, and that is to force this bad, this incompetent, this deeply divided and dysfunctional government to an election, because, I mean, the current situation is not in the public interest. It is not in our public interest for this to continue.
Well, of course, the big event of the week that the Craig Thompson affair and the Peter Slipper affair, for that matter, tended to overshadow was the budget. A very significant budget for the Labor government in that it predicts a forecast for the first time. And as Shadow Assistant Treasurer Matthias Cormann, I want to see if you can at least agree with a couple of points in the budget. And that is, firstly, forget about the accounting tricks and the fact that there are forecasts.
Of which there are many?
Well, sure. All budgets have them, and they all rely on forecasts. But surely you agree at least with the Wayne Swan's focus on achieving a surplus. This is something you would have wanted to see from the Treasurer.
Well, we totally agree that the budget should be in surplus and that government should live within its means, but we don't believe that this Labor government will deliver a surplus.
All right, we'll have to wait and see on that in terms of economic performance and how the forecasts
Wayne Swan won't be there for it.
The other point I wanted to ask you about was the tax loss carryback laws, a good policy introduced to give a little bit of tax relief to small business. Surely you agree with that policy as well?
Well, that is a policy that we actually suggested in opposition. Back in 2009, we recommended it as an appropriate measure in the context of the global financial crisis. Well, I mean, we will now be looking at the totality of the budget. Ever since, you know, obviously, I mean, our budget is in a $44.4 billion deficit position now. Since 2009, the budget position has dramatically deteriorated. So we will be looking at the totality of the budget over the next few weeks. We've obviously got 2 weeks of Senate estimates to go through to ask questions about the detail. You see, with Labor, you've always got to look at the detail behind what they say, and because you can't ever take for granted that the way they put something forward is the best and most appropriate way. But in principle, yes, I mean, this is something that we've recommended in the past, and in principle, we think it's a good idea, but the devil is going to be in the detail.
Now, one of the big problems that Tony Abbott and your whole economic team faces at the moment is that you're opposing the mining tax, but you've initially said that you'll support some of the family payments, some of the extra family payments that will be funded from the mining tax. You can't have your cake and eat it too, can you?
Well, I mean, that is just all part of the Labor Party smoke and mirrors. I mean, the family payments are not linked to the mining tax at all. When the mining tax package was put together...
Hang on, that's how they're funded. That's how they're paid for. And if you're going to keep them, you'll have to find another way to pay for them.
Chris, with all due respect, when the Labor Party announced the mining tax package, they attached 11 promises to it. In this budget, they've now scrapped 4 of those promises altogether, and they've deferred 2 of them. So more than half of the promises that the Labor Party attached to the mining tax have now been scrapped or deferred. We pointed out at the time that Labor's mining tax package was a fiscal train wreck in the making because it was a highly volatile, downward trending revenue source which was linked to an increasing fixed cost of a whole series of promises which was going to cost more over time than the mining tax was going to rise. The government clearly now has accepted our critique and our point, which is why they've scrapped a whole heap of measures. Now we have made a judgment in relation to the family payments on their merits as a standalone measure, and clearly in the context of Labor's toxic carbon tax, which will push up the cost of living, which will make us less competitive internationally, which will cost jobs, all of that without doing anything to reduce emissions. Of course, what we have said is that we acknowledge that families are under pressure from the cost of living pressures, and that in recognition of that, we have said that we would be supporting it. Now, down the track, obviously, you know, the best thing that we can do to help families is to scrap the carbon tax. And once we've achieved that, obviously, we will reconsider the appropriate mix of family support.
Okay, I just want to now go to another issue that unfolded this week, and this was, of course, the ghost of a treasurer past being brought up by Michael Kroger.
You know, the reason I don't have lunch with Peter much anymore is because I can't stand it, to be honest. You sit there for 2 hours and all you do is go through Peter's list of enemies perceived and real. We start on John Howard and then he goes on to Alexander Downer and Michael Ronaldson and John Hewson and, you know, Andrew Peacock and everyone else he's never liked.
Well, that's a significant Liberal Party power broker, Michael Kroger, really giving a free character assessment of his former best friend and long-time Liberal Treasurer, Peter Costello, of course. Matthias Cormann, does this Does this unearth a horrible level of factional warring within the Liberal Party, especially in Victoria?
Well, let me just say that Peter Costello is one of the giants of the Liberal Party. He's done an outstanding job as Treasurer for Australia. I make it my business to talk to him as often as I can, to catch up with him as often as I can, to seek his advice, to pick his brain on economic and fiscal policy matters. He's been very generous to me, and I know he's been very generous to many others, helping us in our cause to defeat this bad Labor government.
Do you
and let me
catch up
just
with
say
Michael
that in
Kroger
all of
as well?
I have actually had lunch with Michael Kroger 2 years ago or so, and it was a very pleasant lunch. But let me just say about Peter Costello that in all of our conversations, yes, he's been very negative. He's been very negative about Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan and what a terrible job they're doing to this country. I have never ever heard him say anything negative about anybody in the Liberal Party, quite to the contrary. And as I say, he's been very generous in his support and in his backup, helping us do our job, holding this bad government to account and being a strong, better alternative government.
All right, thanks very much for joining us today, Senator Matthias Cormann.
Good to be here.
I do want to point out to viewers, of course, too, that I was after a Labor guest today, but some of our Labor MPs and ministers were just a little bit shy on us this week. I'll be back in a moment with our political panel.